しょうがないわよ。遅い。
Just what is this pink goldfish and why does it keep appearing in Sailor Moon? Even if you never noticed it before, after this video, you'll never be able to unsee it. Because this goldfish is more significant than you think. But what makes it so important? Let's find out. Welcome to the world of Goldfish Warning. To quickly summarize, it's a light comedy about a girl named 𝙛𝙞𝙨𝙮 whose father's company went bankrupt after he died. Her family then had to sell their house to pay off their debts. All she's left with is a tiny goldfish named Gyopi, but she's still a broke loser who can't afford to study at her dream academy. 𝙛𝙞𝙨𝙮 is now destined to suffer from poverty and drop dead in the streets only for no one to remember her. Oh, what's that about this being a light comedy? You have Wapiko to thank for that.
なんか全部話したらすっきりしちゃった。青春だな。
After cheering on 𝙛𝙁𝙀, she then finds a note from her past father containing a fortune. She now rebels against her old school and swears to build a new one with her newfound fortune to rival it and make her father proud. What's interesting about this premise is that most of it revolves around 𝙛𝙁𝙀, but the first human character we see is Wapiko, and she's the one who discovers 𝙛𝙁𝙀 passed out on the ground in the first episode. Wapiko is the face of the show, even more so than the titular goldfish, who despite following around her everywhere, actually belongs to 𝙛𝙁𝙀. This is because Wapiko commands your attention in her presence. If 𝙛𝙁𝙀 was the series mascot, it'd be like if Squidward took center stage over SpongeBob. But what this dynamic really made me think of was codename Sailor V. Remember when Minako was originally going to be the main character before Usagi or Sailor Moon was first even conceptualized?
First, I drew Sailor V for the comic magazine Run Run, a special edition of the well-known Nakayoshi. The story expanded into Sailor Moon, which began to appear regularly in the original Nakayoshi magazine.
There we have our first connection, Nakayoshi. That's the same magazine the Goldfish Warning manga was published in. They can also be seen together in a couple video games like Panic in Nakayoshi World for the Super Famicom. If we look at the airing dates for the anime versions of both of these shows, Sailor Moon aired just after Goldfish Warning in the same time slot and by the same studio, Toei. When it came to picking a director, no time was wasted and Sailor Moon was quickly rushed to production.
I didn't actually choose the series. My bosses basically told me, so you're going to work on this new upcoming anime, and that's how I ended up on the project.
This is what series director Junichi Sato said about joining Sailor Moon, having just come off fresh from another project he was working on.
At that time, I was working on another Nakayoshi property, Goldfish Warning, airing in the same time slot. Most of the staff who were working on that show were brought over to the new Sailor Moon project.
So the time slot is the same, the staff is mostly the same, but the demographic is different. What's the deal with that?
I heard that many people had seen Goldfish Warning and thought it was interesting, but I didn't get the impression that anime fans were excited about it. I thought it was because of the low stature of the characters and the young target demographic for the story and other aspects, so I decided to make Sailor Moon with a high stature to try to reach anime fans.
This is one big difference between the two shows. While there are taller characters in Goldfish Warning and short characters in Sailor Moon, height is a very important aspect to Goldfish Warning specifically. Characters will often shrink in size or become deformed as a way of visually telling the audience how a character is feeling.
I wanted to inject as much of the manga's expression as possible into the animation.
Let's look at Wapiko and analyze the three forms that she has. The A form depicts her with the most detail and is used when Wapiko is being serious or calm. The B form simplifies her design a bit more, which can immediately be told apart by the shape of her eyes. Finally, the C form is used when Wapiko is being aloof or having fun. For a kids show, body language and exaggeration is incredibly important. Goldfish Warning uses this technique to enhance its visual humor, which is the best way to appeal to audience members of any age.
Hideaki Anno called Sailor Moon a carefree paradise, and I guess that's an apt description. That is certainly what I was aiming for. I think of it as a children's variety show.
In the Anime Age article, the world of anime director Junichi Sato, a lineage is formed. Described as originally interested in the expressive power that only manga can offer, Mr. Sato worked his way through Otaro, to Goldfish Warning, to Sailor Moon, which combined gag and heroic characteristics and made for a unique expression. The team took that experience of experimenting with different body types and facial features to bring the show to life. Everybody is rendered with a wide range of emotions, with Usagi and Luna being some of the most expressive. The body language isn't quite as uniform as Goldfish Warning, with a greater focus on keeping these mature-looking characters on model, but the animation team never quite strays away from their comic and cartoon influences. While Usagi herself may not deform like Wapiko, certain characteristics such as tornado running can occasionally still be seen. Speech bubbles, which were a prominent element in Goldfish Warning, are expanded upon and given their own personality. The idea here was to have an interesting way of having a character say their line and show something on screen without cutting away to a separate scene. Spinning stars were also commonly used between both of these shows because they were a cheap way of adding emphasis to a reaction. There are lots of intricate single-frame in-betweens that are near impossible to catch on television, but get yourself a laserdisc and you can appreciate just how gorgeous this show is frame by frame. I have a theory that similar to these impact frames, the animators may have snuck in these nods to past works for the hardcore fans who bought the show to find at home. This is something they used to do a lot back in the day. A small yet odd cameo would have to be Tweety in the Magical Tickle ending. Magic Users Club TV has a charm from Fun Fun Pharmacy in it, which, while from different studios, share some of the same staff. Notably Ikuko Ito, who previously was a character designer for Sailor Moon. In episode 31 of Nurse Angel Ririka SOS, Ririka can be seen with chocolates in the shape of characters from Red Riding Hood Cha-Cha. Hime-chan from Hime-chan's Ribbon can also be seen walking in the crowd with Pokota hanging off her shoulder. But unless you have prior knowledge of these shows and characters, they're likely going to fly over your head. I wanted to be thorough, so I went back and watched all of season 1 of Sailor Moon, keeping my eyes peeled for every second just to see how many references I could catch. Let's go through them all. The first thing that stood out to me was Usagi's clock, which resembles the chicken from Goldfish Warning. One thing that we'll discover later on is that they stop hiding these Easter eggs at some point, but this clock remains consistent. It's always in Usagi's room, and knowing that it has a place of origin is actually kind of cool. Moving on to episode-specific moments, in episode 2 after Umino gets possessed by the fortune teller, we can see him reading a comic with Furuyoshi on the cover. They could have put anything they wanted on that cover, and they went with the gag manga that they just got done adapting. I kinda love that. Episode 3 has a brief cameo from Chitose in Miss Haruna's classroom, and of course she's sitting right next to the window, which is so main character of her. It's also worth noting that after this episode she no longer appears in the classroom. At the start of episode 8, we can see Usagi reading a magazine with some illustrations on the right that are very reminiscent of author Neko Nekobe's art style. She's even drawn in the C style here. On the left is a character that kinda looks like Chitose. This one seems more like a nod to the author herself rather than anything specific in her works, but I figured I should highlight it anyway. In Rei's introductory episode, there is a group of girls who visited Hikawa Shrine who are about to board the cursed bus. As Usagi spots them all waiting for it, we get a couple close-ups of their shrine amulets, with this kid rocking a Gilby keychain on her bag. The very next episode is the first entry from director Kunihiko Ikuhara. He would later get promoted to series director about midway through season 2 up until Sailor Stars before swapping to Takuya Igarashi. But in season 1 he was behind some of the best episodes like episode 6. I mention this because despite Wapiko being omnipresent in the crowd in this episode, Ikuhara himself doesn't seem to like Goldfish Warning all that much. When ANN asked him what his thoughts about the show's lack of popularity overseas was, he simply responded with, "I was never too fond of that project." Ikuhara had also been an episode director on Goldfish Warning, but comparing his episodes between the two works, he definitely found his signature footing with his Sailor Moon episodes. I get the feeling that Goldfish Warning might have had some secret influence on him though, but I'll touch more on that later. Once more, just one episode later, we can see Chitose together with Shuichi. OTP, I ship it. Episode 16 has the first reference I could find to Mapletown Story, which came out before Goldfish Warning and also shared a lot of the same staff. Just like with Usagi's clock, for the longest time I took this one for granted, but that is indeed Patty with a color swap. There is also a debatable Chitose cameo as a kid in this scene, but if you don't buy that, there is an undeniable appearance of Chitose and Wapiko later on in the crowd. Episode 19 shifts the focus from the background to the foreground. When Mamoru is playing the crane game at the arcade, several Sailor Moon and Goldfish Warning characters can be seen as prizes. Later in the episode, Usagi can also be seen with a pair of Gilby branded underwear in her drawers. You already saw Rei holding this Gilby bag in the intro, which is explicitly referenced in the character design sheets. But in the same episode a few scenes prior, a really tall Wapiko can be seen behind her. This episode is noteworthy for being another Ikuhara episode for one, but also for having a parody appearance of Junichi Sato second. He would later go on to parody himself in several other shows he worked on, including the TV version of Magic Users Club and Season 3 of Magical Doremi. Finally, in Makoto's introduction episode, right before Crane Game Joe's encounter with Zoisite, a Wapiko doll can be seen dropping on the ground. It's in full focus and can be seen in several shots in this scene, including a sneaky Gilby for a single frame. Earlier on in the episode, there is also a very subtle reference to Snoopy on the lid of this lunchbox, which I definitely wasn't expecting. That's it for Season 1 though. I did watch the rest just to make sure, and because it's a fun show to watch even when you're pausing to analyze background characters in a crowd shot, but my hopes weren't looking up. I do find it interesting how the introduction episodes of 2 Sailor Scouts contain these references, but looking at Jupiter's episode number, things started to make more sense to me. That was episode 25 of the classic series, which means it's near the end of the second cour and ready to be renewed for another season. It's easy to take the success of this show for granted, considering the juggernaut it eventually became, but from the very beginning there were doubts of it ever making it past the first cour.
We barely got Sailor Moon finished in time to start airing immediately after Goldfish Warning ended. It was a really crazy schedule and we worked a lot of late nights. Almost nothing was decided until pretty much the last minute, and the details were constantly changing. We would get bits of character art, bios, and plot summaries from Ms. Takeuchi, and immediately went to the drawing board to start writing our story around it.
Sailor Moon was quite literally slapped together to meet a deadline. It's not like Sato and his team had no experience up until this point, but this is where I believe the influence of Goldfish Warning is the most apparent. The show followed a 2-story structure, meaning one episode was more like 2 half-episodes combined into a feature. The manga was still ongoing, so the team had to write new story scenarios like crazy, and they got really efficient at it. This has been the Toei way practically since the dawn of TV animation, with Sally the Witch for example containing 109 episodes and only drawing from a single volume of manga.
It was a 2-story structure, and since we were doing it for a year, we needed a lot of stories. So I remember starting out by saying, I don't care what kind of stories you have, just come up with something you think would be fun to tell.
The style of Goldfish Warning came very naturally to him. Pretty impressive for a show that's considered to be groundbreaking in Japan. The challenge now was to cut down on the cell count.
Toei Doga's production team was determined to reduce the number of cells at all costs. They had originally been working on 3,500 cells per episode, but they had reduced it to 3,000, and their stance was, we want you to aim for 2,000 cells for their next series as much as possible. The planning department said, well, right now we're preparing a show with a character who is about 3 heads tall and small, and it won't take too many sheets. But when I was assigned to the next project, it was Sailor Moon. It looked like it would take a lot of work. After talking with the production team, we started compromising, saying, well, we can't make 2,000 cells, but we're aiming for 2,500 or so.
Several techniques were used to cut down the number of pictures shown on screen. Sailor Moon uses a lot of bank animation for its transformation sequences, attack animations, and other miscellaneous pieces of reusable animation. Whether you're a manga purist or anime fan, one advantage manga has is that it's faster to read. This extensive use of bank animation, no matter how pretty and iconic the cuts are, can slow the episode down considerably.
The transformations got pretty long when it got up to 5 soldiers, huh?
Additionally, changes had to be made to fit the format of TV animation. This meant cutting or readjusting content in the manga for the sake of simplicity. For instance, in the manga, Sailor Moon has a mask that matches Tuxedo Mask.
Ms. Takeuchi wanted her to wear a mask, but it takes a very skilled person to draw her properly and cutely when there are objects around her eyes. I also wanted to cut down on the work for the animator, so I decided to remove the mask.
This is one such instance that may spark some conflicting feelings in manga readers. There are both minor and major changes from the manga. Usagi is notably much more of a crybaby in the anime. Love it or hate it, there is an explanation.
For those watching on TV, we wanted to develop Usagi as a character you felt you could be friends with. Having her always be a klutz wouldn't work for that, so it was important to make her laugh a lot. In order to build more sympathy with her, we inserted more funny scenes. I had the writing staff accustomed to writing stories in a comical way. I wanted the children to feel a closer relationship with Usagi.
Call it filler if you want, but I think this is why Sailor Moon became such a big success. Usagi is an iconic character, yes, but I think she's also a great symbol for mental health awareness. She's a powerful character because she's a crybaby. Usagi keeps showing us time and time again that it's okay to laugh and okay to cry because it's showing human emotion. Just like how Wapiko can also show us that it's okay to have fun and not take everything so seriously all the time. If you keep hiding your feelings, you're gonna find yourself in a miserable rut. What's encouraging too is that Usagi is very capable of pulling her own weight and working for herself when she puts her mind to it. Kinda like how the staff were able to put this show together as tightly as they did, despite the rough schedules. They wear their influences with pride and use them to streamline the process.
When I was directing the show, I found that the format of each episode was similar to Mito Komon. The conflict is established, the heroes pursue, and when the fight concludes, the seal is brought out.
The composer for Goldfish Warning returns with a score that helps bring the world to life. Femininity is a core aspect of Sailor Moon's story, so that voice was expressed, but faint echoes of Goldfish Warning can still be heard.
Since purely instrumental composition has its limits in expressing what is feminine, I thought of using voice, which has a stronger impact. After all, I'd started my pro music career in the chorus group Soap. I figured I'd try throwing in that characteristic of mine and expressed it. The same staff was carried over from Goldfish Warning, and the series director was also Junichi Sato. I knew a lot about the gag tempo the director Sato tended to have, so I made it without any worry.
Ikuhara, despite seemingly not being a fan, probably did have a few touches from Goldfish Warning rub off on him. For example, there's a couple instances in the series of scenes that are drawn out at excruciating length for comedic effect. Perhaps most infamously is a scene from the Sailor Moon R movie where he hangs on this frame for nearly 20 seconds. Awkward pauses like this are also frequently seen in Goldfish Warning, and it's just another spice to its comedic palette. Another thing that stood out to me was in episode 6, which was his first Sailor Moon episode. After Usagi transforms and enters the bar, she attempts to order a cream soda from the bartender. There's an insert song in Goldfish Warning that appears throughout the series, which mentions cream soda in the lyrics. But even if I'm wrong with my assessment, Sailor Moon did have a profound impact on him, and we may not have gotten Utena without it.
You know, everybody raves about Ikuhara's work after Sailor Moon, but I think his true value is actually Goldfish Warning.
My younger works also have a lot of trauma attached to them, so maybe don't dive into them so eagerly.
That still leaves us with Takeuchi though. She's displayed various feelings towards the TV series throughout the years, most of which being conflicting. The depiction of Tuxedo Mask was notable due to sometimes straying away from her original vision.
Though Tom's main character, Kiriko, was my ideal type, I like dark characters with shadows. I fully planned on keeping him a serious character in the manga, no gags.
Although it appears even this aspect in her own manga began to fade at some point.
I wanted to draw my Tuxedo Mask as sort of an ideal, but he became too talkative.
As a creator myself, I know the feeling of putting something out there and later having regrets. Stories are personal, and it can hurt when they are tinkered with when adapted to fit somebody else's vision. You want to represent yourself, and even if most elements are there, the slightest differences can sting because they aren't yours anymore. The anime taking a generally more comedic route led to Tuxedo Mask having some goofy moments of his own, which Takeuchi did not like.
I really like Tuxedo Mask, and he's not supposed to be like that. I wonder if the animation staff will get angry at me if I say that.
I know for some the anime will be an impossible sell because of that, and I totally get that. Sailor Moon is a story that had a big impact on many of us, and to some is incredibly sacred. To be tinkered with at all is doing a disservice to the original source, so just read the manga for an authentic experience. But I want to give the anime team the credit they deserve for all the hard work they put into making the show. In some ways it doesn't represent Takeuchi's vision, but it succeeds in being a fun show to watch regardless. You can see it evolve all the way from its inception to its conclusion. We get to see the characters grow through their hardships and laugh all the same. Maybe the reason they stopped hiding these Easter eggs was due to potential legal issues in the future after the series took off. I certainly wouldn't blame them. Then again, who knows, maybe there were some that I missed. I did only briefly get into the second season before stopping, so there's plenty of ground to cover. I do have one final catch though that I would like to show off, and it's from Miss Takeuchi herself. Who knows, maybe she also knows about the importance of this series. Oh, I wonder.